Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, BDEX's co-founder and CEO. Hi, David. Can you believe Omni IQ has been launched for 1 full year now?
Wow. No, I can't believe it. So we had two milestones, a milestone with this podcast being at a year, and now Omni IQ officially being a year. That seems crazy.
I know. 1 year. Well, here we are. And episode 49 with Deconstructing Data. So time flies. But before we lose too much time, let's bring in today's amazing guest. Welcome to the show, Aaron Edwards. He's CEO and co-founder of the Charles Group. Let's bring him in. Welcome, Aaron.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
Hi, not too bad. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, going well. Great to have you on the show, Aaron. Appreciate you coming on and joining us. Let's kick this off with a little history. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to start the Charles Group, and a little bit about what you guys do and how you serve your customers.
Okay, I'll give you the short form version because I have a tendency to ramble. But yeah, I started in this industry, out of this industry in finance originally, and left that to kind of come into the advertising marketing space. I was originally in London, moved to New York. I co-founded the agency with my sister, who's a chief creative officer and creative director, and she kind of manages the creative side of the business, and I kind of manage the business end of the business. And we got started mainly because we saw a need for agile kind of workflows, quicker ways of doing things, and ultimately what we like to call transformation work or transformational work through really strong design. And that's really what we did. We'd build websites, we'd do brand IDs. I caught the attention of Bloomberg, and we ended up doing a BloombergMedia.com redesign, as well as working with the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones, which has kind of led us now to this place where we sit at the intersection of kind of design, content, strategy, and digital marketing.
Very cool. So that's an amazing story that you actually started this business with your sister. I can't imagine going into business with my sister. Hopefully she's not listening, but I think she knows we wouldn't be able to work together. So kudos to you. Really interesting to hear that story. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, should we dive into our first topic of, let's see, pairing data and cultural insights? Can you kick us off with this one, Aaron?
Oh, yeah. Kind of like, I like to think of this one as a conversation starter, because I think there's kind of two sides of the coin or two sides of the equation that a lot of people think about when they think about marketing. And, you usually have the creative folks who have got ideas and concepts, and then you have the data folks, and they're like, hardcore KPIs and metrics and so forth. And it's typically been a bit of a headbutting situation we've seen and we've gone through in the past, early on in the days where we were starting to get data around our clients, we'd start making these assumptions based on what we saw. And these assumptions would usually be based on one or two data points, which now looking back, was very juvenile of us. And so over time, we've developed this understanding of thinking, well, how do we think through data, and how do we think through data's application in relation to creative concepting, content creation, content marketing, etc. We start to realize is that data really is the voice in the room, right? It's not the be all and end all. There isn't going to be one data point that proves out an entire hypothesis or model. Instead, we use data to contextualize information. And ultimately, we use our creative brains to think about how we're utilizing, the idea that's then centered around multiple touch points inside of that data ecosystem. And ultimately, how do we arrive to an insight and a recommendation for our client that we feel is beneficial and helpful to them marketing and creating content. So, we like to say that we pair data and cultural insights, and we fuse them together to help generate a better way of thinking through how we advertise for our clients and our brands. And I think these are kind of, this is an important area to discuss, because I think a lot of agencies talk about, utilizing data, but don't really know where to start. And sometimes you have creatives who say, I don't want to even think about the data. The data is irrelevant. What does it mean, for us when we're creating a super creative conceptual campaign? And so we like to think we have a nice little methodology and formula around that.
Oh, that's really
It's
interesting.
So tell us about, what does that mean, really? Like, are you talking about having different sets of KPIs for different audiences? Is it something like that?
Well, so the way that we kind of approach every project that we work on is with research. And a lot of the time, it's not in the budget. It's not in the scope. Wasn't in the brief. We don't need research. We have all the data we need. Why do we need you guys to tell us what we already do? And so we say, well, let's take a look at it. Let's have a look at the data. Let's see exactly what you're looking at. Let's understand your measurement plans. Let's understand the measurement framework behind what we're looking at. And then tell us, what is it that you see from this information? And when we start asking these questions, usually it becomes clear that there's expertise or a really specific perspective in one area, but not necessarily thinking through the lens of others. So we like to basically say to our clients, if we don't see, we see these missing pieces, we call it the 4 C's. We say, let's look at the consumer, let's look at the category, let's look at the competition, and let's look at the culture. And let's understand those 4 areas and understand how, the data that you have existing is, complies or implies different insights into those areas. And so when we think about, any kind of strategy that we're developing, it really needs to be developed from the insight. And those 4 areas are the ways in which we kind of address how we develop insights around building the strategy for our clients.
When you're looking into the 4th C for culture, what exactly are you looking at?
Oh, I love this question. So it's everything, right? It's the internet. It's what we live, breathe every single day, right? What's happening on TikTok? What's been said in a forum? What's been going on in Reddit? What's happening on Twitch? What's going on YouTube? Sentiment analysis is really interesting. Lots of different interesting things you can do now around conversations that are being had online. There's a lot of interesting data extraction tools and techniques that are now used to be able to pull and scrape data that gives you a really interesting perspective on those areas. And ultimately, understanding what's trending, what's popular inside of popular culture, whether that's music, fashion, art, science, it really could be anything. And so what we like to focus on is thinking through the lens of, if we're looking at the consumer and understanding kind of where they fit where they may or may not fit inside our ecosystem, what are some of the subcultures that we are observing that connect them to a main marketing trend or main marketing theme or popular culture event that's currently happening?
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the bigger the brand, the more information there is out there about, with respect to those consumer insights, right? I mean, that's,
Correct.
The bigger the brand, the more conversations that are happening on various different platforms about that brand. And so when you're talking about the research part of it, you're talking about pulling in that, that information. What are those conversations that consumers are having about your brand, and understanding, maybe how they're using the product or what they like or don't like, and addressing those in your campaigns. Interesting.
Correct.
Very interesting.
And we found a lot of interesting extrapolations, right? Usually in the comments section, especially when you're looking at CPG lifestyle brands, right? And it's like, you guys don't get this, or this is really cool, and I can't believe that you have a view and opinion on it. And so when we think about that as engagement, we think about that as a metric for success. We say, wow, are we in the conversation here? Are we being perceived by the consumer in the right light here? Do we think that we're positioning ourselves correctly? So it brings up a whole bunch of other questions around the strategic tone of voice, positioning, etc. for the brand. But ultimately, our goal is to be always a part of the conversation, with the audience, and be continuing to have that real-time contextual information that makes them feel that you're relevant as a brand.
It's good stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
that's really interesting, Jesse. You recall we had the conversation, I guess it was 2 episodes ago, and the name escapes me. Maybe you'll remember the name. The organization that was helping get those insights from consumers.
yes.
That, you know, and one of the examples was like, what was it? It was like, I don't think it was Circle K, but it was one of those. Was it Circle K?
Gas
Maybe it
station.
was
I think
Circle
it might have been Circle K.
Yeah, I was, and I was like, well, who talks about Circle K online? You know what I mean? But that's what their business was all about, was about, you know, getting, you know, consumers engaged, you know, and maybe getting them to take a selfie in front of the, you know, the Circle K for some reason, maybe because they're going to get some sort of points or some, you know, opportunity to win something, whatever, but getting them to, you know, to engage with the brand so that the brand can learn about how consumers, you know, what's the consumer sentiment around the brand. And so that's really interesting that you're talking about sort of the same thing. Let's find out, you know, what the consumer sentiment is around the brand and use that, you know, as a learning exercise and research on how we should, you know, market to consumers going forward.
Correct.
Definitely.
Super cool.
Very cool. And speaking of all that data, should we talk about data governance a little bit? So can you kick us off, Aaron, on data governance within the marketing agency space?
Yeah, so this is something I'm learning. So please forgive me here. I'm definitely not a data governance expert or legal. There is no legal advice here. Disclaimer. But you know, I think it's an area that we as an agency are starting to become very, very. No, I'm not going to say concerned about, but definitely aware of. You know, cybersecurity policies, etc. When you start to work with these larger organizations, a lot of the compliance and regulations around, you know, how data is being managed, how data is being stored, how data is being encrypted. You know, all of these things are really part of the consideration. And as marketers and as, you know, in a marketing agency space, we really need to be thinking about how we're protecting and managing our client data. So, you know, a few things that I always like to go to, you know, things like backing up data. Now, this is a gray area because you may say, well, certain compliance regulations state that you can't have physical servers and everything has to be in a cloud, or sometimes it's the complete opposite. But ultimately, you know, you want to make sure, whether you're providing graphic design services, website design services, etc., that there's some form of backup somewhere, that there's some form of cold storage element to the work that you have, because we've heard many horror stories of people being hacked, and all of a sudden the data that they thought they had is no longer available, and that could be millions, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of potential, you know, intellectual property, and also, you know, irrevocable damages. So having data backed up is going to be really key. Securing your devices and your network is going to be key. So, you know, no password for the password being utilized. I think we've all been guilty of creating passwords and things like that. And also, you know, thinking about where you're utilizing some of your devices. You know, we've heard things of people having specific tools that can scan information from mobile phones that can then basically be leveraged to, you know, unlock phones, etc. So there's a lot of you know, protocol around making sure that the devices you have are secure, and that the networks that you're on are secure, and that you're not, you know, transferring data, etc., unbeknownst to yourself. Encryption kind of goes hand in hand with that, right? As well as kind of thinking through multi-factor authentication, MFA. It's something that we're really big on at the agency. There's not one device, not one service, not one area that doesn't have some form of multi-factor authentication, although there are bypasses for it, obviously. And then, you know, one of the really big ones, which is absolutely nothing to do with technology or any kind of thing, is the human element. You know, from what we've learned so far and so recently, a lot of data governance issues actually come from just a human mistake. It's less about the software and the system that's been implemented, but more about people not understanding, what it is that they need to do to make sure that their data isn't, being, showcased in areas that they weren't aware of. Think of something as simple as Chat GPT, right? Or some of these other AI generative platforms where, people may upload a certain document thinking that, oh, I can, optimize my efficiency or workflow without realizing that you've just fed highly confidential, sensitive information to an open neural network that then may decide whatever it wants to do with that information. So, really putting the training plans and policies in place to help guide staff, I think is really, really going to be key. I mean, I'm just being fully transparent, and this is not to scare people, but we've had phishing scams that have become so sophisticated. People mirroring my email address, mirroring my phone number, sending messages to personal staff members to buy bank cards or purchase products from Amazon. We've had some very unfortunate scenarios and situations. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to managing your data, but also managing your clients' data too.
For sure. You make some really good points, and that phishing scam is one that's going around a lot. And basically, what we're finding is that, it's happened on our team as well. And we have an internal flag that flags them. Luckily, we've been able to, sort of prevent disaster. But those phishing scams are really crazy. How they go after, posing as you, right, the CEO of the company or the founder of the company, and sending messages to the employees asking them to do favors. And it's one of the popular ones that's going around now. It's crazy. But you mentioned also the importance of data security, and I think that there's a lot that people don't realize that can happen. Yes, there's the phishing scams and things like that. People don't realize how easy it is to inject a malware into a network. One of the most popular ones is through the HR department, where they'll send a resume, and it'll appear to be, a regular resume, but it's actually a document that's an attachment that is designed to basically create a hole in your network. And then from there, they can basically do anything that person could do at their workstation that opened it. So there's a lot of crazy scams out there that are all geared towards trying to get at whatever data you're holding on your servers, and so the data security is super important. It's something that we hold to the highest regard, in the sense that we work with financial institutions and some pretty large organizations that are really strict on how their data is handled. And so we have to go through a lot of checks and balances in order to make sure that they can trust that their data is safe with us. And a lot of smaller companies can't afford to go through that. And so those are usually the ones that are at highest risk.
100%. Very unfortunate. Scary topic. Let's move on.
I know, it really is, but it's an important one. But another one that we probably don't get into that as often as maybe we should, David, on deconstructing data. But one that we do get into very often is the cookieless future. Mm-hmm. And so we're curious to hear from you about the cookieless world, and how the cookieless world is not really cookieless.
Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting one. I'd love to say something really profound and exciting, but unfortunately, I don't have anything profound or exciting to say here. I think I have a lot of the same kind of rhetoric, which is, first party data is the future. We need it. But I think what I get really interested in, a few years ago when I first got into the industry, it was an area that I was boggling my mind, and I was desperate to try to find a solution or build one. And it was really around this idea of the unification of ID, right? Like, how could you unify some of the data that exists or metadata that exists within somebody's profile and leverage that as a way to improve, contextual and personalized advertising. And I know that there's very large companies that have endeavored on projects like that. I think Newstar was one of them, where they built a uniform ID system where they could identify you from your, device number or from your cell phone number, and ultimately, create a one-to-one in terms of how you exist inside of their marketing ecosystem. But it's an area that I think brands are really going to have to start paying a lot of attention to, but also devising kind of ways in which they think about how they market to people that exist in their first-party data marketing ecosystem. And what I mean by that is you have kind of paid media, you have organic, you have CRM, you have website data. There are all these different areas, all these different channels that exist where there are bits and bobs of data sets. And so, really for brands to become, I think, more sophisticated, they're going to need to really think through how they're leveraging their first-party data and how the customer is navigating through that ecosystem. So what are the different touch points? How do we ensure that we're not sending generic, advertisements to the same list because they sit inside of our CRM retargeting pool? How do we build a one-to-one conversation with them that's more contextualized to the things that they've been looking for? How do we figure out potential upsell opportunities inside of what we have as our product suite for these guys? So marketers are already doing this, they're already thinking this through, but I'm not sure that the execution is quite matching yet the desire and appetite for that type of marketing. And so I think when we think about the cookieless world, I think it really is just a comment around how much more sophisticated marketers and advertisers are going to have to become in order to kind of maintain, attract, and retain kind of audiences.
Yeah, it's definitely become a growing challenge. I mean, the idea of having a unified ID, while super interesting and exciting, the challenge there is who owns that, right? I mean, 100 companies came out with their own ID, whether it be Newstar and LiveRamp and Lotame and, ID5, and there's so many of them, you can't even list them all. And they all touted, hey, mine is going to be the next, unified ID. Unfortunately, you can't have, 100 unified IDs. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So that's really been the challenge. But if you have one, then who owns that, right? And you can't have one company managing, all of that.
Well, so that's where it gets interesting. Google recently, I don't know if you're aware, this launched a tool called Pair. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No.
Google Pair. No, it's their new. How can we put this? One-to-one unified ID. So basically, it's an identity solution specific to Google that allows advertisers and publishers who are buying on Google's buying platform to match first-party data to deliver like personal ads. So I think
so that makes sense.
Publisher advertiser identity reconciliation, which I think is to your point, right? We can't have 100 versions of this, right? It kind of makes the whole thing very messy and multi-touch attribution almost impossible. But I think we may be experiencing or seeing kind of the rise and dominance of the players who have, the market share of advertising dollars, creating even larger walled gardens between, their own data sets, and really brands being held at the mercy or held to ransom. I mean, we've seen this with Meta, most recently with the extreme rise in media costs for certain types of advertising and targeting. And so, I think there's an interesting idea or conversation around, do these very large tech companies start to influence, the way in which we view cookies and first-party data being managed inside of their own ecosystems, meaning clients end up spending more money because they have better data with with Google versus Facebook. So Google is now a priority for them versus Facebook. And it's just an interesting thought-starting question. Curious to get your thoughts on it.
It is. So, I mean, one of the problems is that the government sort of cracked down on tracking data about consumers, right? And all the legislature around it has actually, I think, backfired and created bigger walls around these walled gardens, right? Because now, you look at Google, like now all of a sudden Google has this opportunity here to control all of the advertising. And in the Facebook situation, we had, all these small businesses that were relying on, being able to, track that consumer behaviors in order for them to target their ads. That, once those changes went into place, they all failed. And I personally saw some of them go out of business. A lot of small businesses that just all of a sudden couldn't reach their ideal customers because they couldn't be tracked anymore. And so now you've got Apple and you've got Google and you've got Meta, whatever, Amazon, and now they've just unfortunately just become stronger because now you have all of these other smaller, mid-sized, all these SMBs that are trying to compete with them. But guess what? The walls have gone up even higher, and now you become even more reliant on them if you want to access the consumers that they control. And so I think that was a big failure, and unfortunately I'm hoping that we can figure out a way around it. I'm hoping that some innovative technology will come out that will say, hey, here's a better way to target consumers. And I personally think it's going to be around AI. I think that that's where we're going. I think that the future of ad targeting is going to be less about tracking data about consumers per se, and more tracking data around actions that are happening, not even knowing who the consumer is, but seeing those actions and using AI to make determinations of what actions may or may not happen, and being able to test that. And that's what AI does, right? It constantly tests and will perfect your ad campaign until it performs the way you're looking for it to perform. So I think that's where we're headed.
And I find that such a fascinating comment, because again, when I first got into this industry, coming from finance, specifically, derivatives and so forth, we had so much complication. I look at finance because it's such a time-honored industry, right? And spent all this time developing into what it is today, which is entire economies. And so I look at what was happening within the algorithmic trading space, and I say that is not that dissimilar, and we are not that far off. In terms of how our trade desk's working now in relation to the amount of information that's exchanged between advertiser and publisher and so forth. I think the actionable part that you're mentioning is basically the missing piece or the missing link. How to turn that information into something that's actionable. But I look to finance and say, well, they actually have now entire funds, hedge funds, just running autonomously, strategies that are running now on an infinite cycle. And that to your point about that action, it's whether it's, being on price and executional speed, or whether it's like something more advanced and more technical and complicated. I think we're going to see a rise in dominance in kind of AI programmers, engineers, building even better versions of things that are ultimately going to make things a one-to-one. So totally with you on that one.
It's a great correlation, because, getting into the data business early on, and the reason why we called our platform a data exchange platform, because we always saw data being, or the future of data being an exchange in the same way that stocks are exchanged or commodities are exchanged, right? And I still think that that's the future, in the sense that, it's all going to be sort of programmatic in that way. It's going to be really interesting. I think the future is going to be really interesting because when you have an AI that is looking at, the bid stream, right, and is looking at, what ads are being served to what devices, on what websites or what apps, and analyzing that in real time, the way that a quant is analyzing, what's going on in the markets in real time and making adjustments based on that, it's gonna be super powerful. And I think that the future of advertising is exactly that. It's an AI-driven ad campaign.
Yeah.
This was really interesting. So wait, David, are you saying that, like, basically earlier you were mentioning you thought the future was AI and there would be only actions and AI would learn based on these actions. So then really there would be no privacy data being shared. It would just be these like trigger points, these actions.
Right. Yeah. The consumer, it doesn't matter who the consumer is. I mean, look at how a quant algorithm analyzes stocks, right, in order to make decisions. It doesn't care what the stock is. It only cares what's happening to the stock. What's the data behind it, right? What are the fundamentals behind it, and what else is happening to correlating stocks? And so I think you're going to have the same situation where it's not an ad is being served. What is happening? What is the correlation between that ad, the time of day, where it was served, the app, all these other signals, and then every other ad impression. And as all of that is analyzed and we see, okay, which ones were, an action occurred, which one did someone click on, which one did someone engage with, which one did someone convert on, and all of a sudden, adjustments are made in, sending more of certain, consumers to this advertisement versus this one on this platform, and so on and so on. It's just going to kind of move all around. You might have this ad, this is your ad, and it's moving all around the internet, depending on what the signals are telling it to and where it should be.
Man, I like that idea. Be a different world. I mean, I guess pretty similar, but we wouldn't have to worry about all the data privacy concerns.
Yeah, exactly. The privacy concerns are not an issue there because it doesn't matter who it's being served to. The AI is determining that based on all these other signals. It's not based on anything personal.
Definitely. Well, on that, we'd love to hear about some of your favorite tools in your tech stack. This is something we ask all the guests on Deconstructing Data. So I don't know, could you list maybe 3 to 5 of your top favorite tools that we can tag in the comments here?
I don't know if I want to give them away. I'm going to be honest. These are like my secret weapons.
The popular ones are like Slack and HubSpot or Snowflake.
We are very on top of right now Adobe Express and Adobe Firefly. I don't know if you're familiar with those guys, but Adobe has gone full force into the whole optimization of workflow for creatives inside of their cloud tool system. And so there is some genius things happening there that we feel could be a game changer for the industry. So I would definitely be imploring people to check out Adobe's suite of tools, specifically Adobe Express and Adobe Firefly. There is some fun stuff that I leverage. Obviously, Slack is one thing. I use a lot of the widgets. I think there's a ChatGPT widget now that sits kind of in browser that allows you to kind of ask things on the fly. So kind of helps assist in the search piece. I've been using Bing. I can't believe I'm saying this because I don't normally use Microsoft, but luckily they're not a client of mine, so I don't mind saying it. But Bing has totally revolutionized the entire search functionality with the integration of OpenAI into Microsoft's ecosystem. And we're seeing some really interesting results specific to digital marketing and terms and the way in which now search is becoming a little bit more contextualized. So I'm using Bing a lot as a querying tool. That's an alternate to Google. So that's, I don't know if that's a common thing, but I know that people don't use Bing that much. Yeah. And then, I think like the G Suite system, Google Slides, etc., the standard stuff, the Google Meets application is pretty cool. There's another one actually, Kartiv, like Kartiv. This is a new kind of AI tool that we're exploring with. It's a really interesting way to optimize the creative production workflow. These are some things we're testing and things that we're actively leveraging on a daily basis that some people might find helpful.
Well, that's awesome. Those are all good ones.
Yeah, those are all good ones. And actually, I want to bring one up about ChatGPT, because I found an interesting widget for it. It's actually a site called Agent GPT. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's a project, so it's still sort of undergoing, but it's really interesting, where you don't have to prompt it. Instead, what you do is you just tell it what your goal is, and it asks ChatGPT what the prompt should be for this goal, and then it creates the prompt, and then it goes and it tries to achieve your goal, which is pretty interesting. I played with it a little bit.
Oh wow.
So that sounds for it. It's Agent GPT.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'm on it already.
Definitely.
It's kind of neat. If you have your own, if you're a subscriber for OpenAI, then you can actually plug in your API key and it'll use your key. If you don't, then you might get a timeout if you ask it something too complex and it has to make too many queries. But it's pretty cool.
Very cool.
On this one.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, well, I guess we have a few minutes left. We might be able to get into some of these post-topic questions, Aaron. So if you don't mind us asking, let me find this one. If you could go back in time to a time when you were first coming into the industry, what is the number one piece of advice you would give yourself?
If I could go back in time and give myself advice, I'd say to be less fearful of repercussions when trialing and erroring the business. I'd say be more forthright, be decisive about what it is that you feel you want to do. Don't be creating 1,000,001 plans and trying to execute 1,000,001 different things poorly. But be fearless. Don't worry so much about whether or not it's going to be a success or a huge failure. Just go out and do it. I think I held myself back a lot because I wanted to become a subject matter expert in a specific field before I felt confident enough to sell or talk to clients about it. In actual fact, I should have just gone and tested the damn thing and just done it, and not worried so much about not knowing everything about it. So I'd say you're never going to know everything. It's the nature of the beast. It's not like finance, where you can read the incredibly theoretical things and some of them still are relevant and apply. We're not talking like quantum physics and mechanics here. It's just, we're in a world of evolution and continuous evolution. So, embrace that and don't be fearful.
Yeah, that's a great one. I like the be fearless motto. It's something that I'm always trying to instill in my daughter, who's 20 going on 21. And it's like, just dive in. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of life, and they make you stronger. You learn from them. So being fearless is something I'm a big fan of. Mistakes are good. Mistakes are great opportunities to learn. So I like that. It's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Great advice.
Yeah, no worries.
And so going off that, are there any lessons you've learned along the way from, this job or past jobs that you think everyone should know?
Yeah. Slow down. I know I said be fearless and try everything, but also like Rome was not built in a day. And, I think there is this common misconception in popular culture that, you work really hard and you can achieve everything in 6 months. It's like, that's not realistic. So recalibrate your expectation and really, really be introspective, really think through. I talk a bit about this. I wrote something on LinkedIn the other day about becoming a subject matter expert, but really think through what it is that you think you know about something, and test yourself on it, right? And when you feel like you've been out of character, you might act to a certain way. You've been really annoyed. Like, take a moment to address that. Don't bypass it as just a moment in time and stress. Think about what it is that's going on with yourself, because I think a lot of the time we very much are in our own heads, in our own space. We're moving at a million miles an hour, and we don't necessarily catch up with ourselves in a way that is helpful. And so you end up in a space of feeling mentally drained. You get into your mental health issues. And I think, some of that can be avoided by just taking a breath, taking a minute, taking some introspection, and taking time for yourself to really think through how you're feeling about things. And so these are all things I've learned over time, and that these are lessons that I'm continuously practicing. I don't think there is anything that I've mastered yet, but there's a student of the game mentality, and I think if you can maintain that, you'll always feel good and do well.
I love that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Slow down and be a student of the game. Have a student of the game mentality. That's good. Well, so in closing, where could our guests find you if they want to connect with you after the show?
Throw me on LinkedIn. Just have a look. I actually blocked my profile, so you can't add me unless you have my email address. But honestly, if you really want to connect with me, add me or follow me. I do write a few things on there. And I'll be honest, I'm not somebody that's a huge social person, right? So LinkedIn is kind of like my place where I express how I'm feeling, and it's pretty raw and it's pretty honest. And if you appreciate raw, honest feedback about life in the professional world, follow me on that.
Awesome. Well, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn, Aaron. So I hope you'll accept my connection request that I sent your way.
I will. It's just so spammy. I'll be honest. That's my issue. There's just too much spam on LinkedIn, so I have to. That's why I've got that on there.
Yep, agree. Well, we really appreciate you joining us today, Aaron. This has been great. Great catching up with you. And we've had some great conversation, and I think that hopefully our listeners enjoyed as well, and were able to absorb all of that. And this has been great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, in closing, I'll go ahead and just play the video. Everyone have a great day. And we didn't mention Omni IQ, but since it is 1 year old, I better pull up the QR code just for a reason. But is there anything you want to say about Omni IQ since it's 1 year old now, David?
Well, yeah, I mean, a year ago, we launched what was just an idea. And I think when we first launched it, it was like this big, on the website, and you could do 2 or 3 things with it. Now you can upload your file of, customer information and, a simple CSV of some consumers from your CRM or whatever it is, and get back, free analytics and add, a whole bunch of data for enrichment, extend the audience, finding more people that are just like your best customers using our AI platform, and improve your ad targeting return on ad spend. So, in a nutshell, That's what it does. It's 1 year old. And, for anyone out there that wants to give it a try, it's free to try. So just scan the QR code or go to BDEX.com and check it out.
Yes. Happy birthday, Omni IQ. And we would love to hear from our listeners as always. So you can reach us at info@bdex.com. Share your qualitative data with us so we can make this better for you. All right, everyone. See you next week.